Hey, what's up, y'all? John Mixdowns here with Intention Music Tech, and today we're going to be covering the famous mix technique of sidechaining. So let's go. But first, before we get into the tutorial, if you need a professional mix and master and want me to mix your music, go to johnmixdowns.com or click the link in the description and follow the fast and easy 3-step process. And remember, all of my mixing and mastering services have a 100% money back guarantee to make sure you're completely satisfied with the final result. So in simple form, sidechaining is when we use the level of an instrument or a sound to trigger a compressor to control the level of another instrument. So there's actually quite a few instances in which sidechaining is utilized in music production and in mixing, but in this video, I'm just going to cover 4 common uses of sidechaining that I really like to use and that I utilize in a lot of my mixes. And the first and by far the most common use of sidechaining is, of course, kick and bass ducking. And what this does, it allows our kick and bass to work cohesively in the mix, so they're not competing with each other because they like to use that same similar frequency range, and sidechaining can help them work together and not compete and fight for that space in the mix. So the second common use of sidechaining is what I call kick and bass pumping. And this is essentially just taking the kick and bass ducking technique and exaggerating it to give the music more of a swelling sound. And this is more of a creative use of sidechaining, and it's very common in EDM music and also in certain types of pop music as well. So the third way of using sidechaining is a way to give our vocals separation from instruments that typically clash with vocals, such as guitars, such as pads, such as synths, or strings, any of those type of instruments that sit in the same frequency range as our vocal. And we can use sidechaining to allow our vocals to sit on top of the mix and not be competing with those instruments. And the fourth sidechaining technique that we're going to look at is reverb and delay ducking on vocals. And this is actually one of my favorite mixing tricks, just simply because it's so effective and helping us get rid of that excess mud that can come when we add too much reverb or trying to get the right amount of delay. And that's just a challenge that we always have as mixers, is trying to get the right amount of reverb or the right amount of delay, or both, without muddying up our mix. And sidechaining can really help us do that. And one more thing that we're going to cover in this video is the difference between an internal sidechain filter and an external sidechain. And when I first started learning how to use sidechaining, I just wasn't really familiar with the difference between the two. So it's an important thing to understand moving forward when you start applying sidechaining to your music production. So let's get into the session and see how all this stuff works. So the name of the song that I'm using for this tutorial is called Fetty, and the artist name is Kaycees Fantasy. Super talented artist from Nigeria. So make sure you go check out the rest of his music on all streaming platforms. So the first thing we're going to look at here is kick and bass ducking. And before I get into the tutorial, I'm just going to play you the song so you see what we have to work with here.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You don't see me falling, but you say I be falling. You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You don't see me falling, but you say I be falling. Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove. I do it cause I wanted to.
Okay, so everything sounds pretty good. And what we're going to focus on is the sub bass and the kick. And what we want is that kick to have its own space, and we're going to kind of carve it out into the mix, into that bass. And we're going to use sidechaining to do that. So for this tutorial, I'm going to use the FabFilter Pro Q compressor. And the reason why I'm going to use it for this particular demonstration is because of the graph that it has. So you can actually visually see what the sidechaining is doing and how the kick is actually carving its own space within the bass. So that's why I'm going to use this compressor for this demonstration. So the first thing we want to do when we're sidechaining is go to the key input and find a bus, a free bus that we want to route to. So I'm going to use bus 27. And once we've done that, we want to make sure on this particular compressor, we want to go to sidechain, and we want to make sure that it's on external sidechain because we're routing out. And what we want to do is go to the kick and then find that bus 27. Sorry, I got two screens here that came on my other screen. And now here we have the fader that's going to trigger this compressor from the key input 27. So I'm going to play the track. I'm going to solo the kick and the bass and show you how this works. So as you can see, there's nothing happening on that compressor. So now what I'm going to do is start bringing in this fader and start applying that compression into the sub. And this is a really big reason why I wanted to use this compressor, because you can see it's literally, the kick is carving its own space into that bass with the compression. And let's A/B it so you can see the difference that it makes. So now it's more present in the mix. So let's play it with everything.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know say I be falling. You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know say I be falling. Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove.
So as you can see, that kick is much more present in the mix, and this of course is to taste. So generally when it comes to the settings on your compressor, you're going to want a faster attack, and then you're also going to want a faster release. You're going to want that kick to hit right away, and then you're going to want it to release right away. And then of course you can adjust the threshold as needed. And this kind of goes into the second use of side chaining, which isn't really used in hip hop music. It's more of an EDM thing. And also certain genres of pop music also use the kick and bass pumping effect. And really all it is just exaggerating this fader till the point where the compressor is actually just working a lot harder. So I'm going to adjust this here right now so you guys can see what it's doing. And I'm going to solo these again. So as you can see, it's really compressing that signal there. And again, this is just more of a creative technique and a creative use of side chaining that definitely isn't really used in hip hop much. But it's just, it goes hand in hand with the kick and bass ducking, which we had just covered. So as you can see, this is just a really easy technique to set up and something that you can start utilizing in your mixes moving forward to make sure that we have that separation with the kick and the bass, and make sure that they both have their own space in the mix. So the next thing we're going to look at here is using side chaining to duck out frequencies to help the vocals pop out of the mix. And this is a technique that's used when we have certain instruments that are clashing with the vocal in the same frequency range, such as guitars or synths or pads or strings, those types of instruments. And for this particular song, I have this lead synth here, and it's pretty much going throughout the whole song. They wanted it going through the whole song, and it's in a very similar frequency range as the vocal. So it's a good example to use side chaining to help duck that frequency out so the vocals can just pop out of the mix a little more and they're not clashing with that lead synth. So again, I'm going to pull up a compressor, but I'm going to use the stock compressor that comes with Pro Tools. And there's a reason why I'm going to use this one for this particular demonstration. So I could show you how to use the low pass and high pass filters to really utilize this technique. So the first thing we want to do when we're using this compressor is key in the side chain. This is very important when you're using this compressor. And once we do that, then we find a bus that we're not using. We've already used bus 27, so now we're going to use bus 28. And then we are going to go to the vocal, send, and we are going to pull up bus 28. And one thing I'm going to do is actually just rename this. This is a very good habit whenever you're routing anything, is to just make sure you rename it and have your session organized. So I'm just going to put Vox sidechain. So again, this is going to work the same way as the previous demonstration. We're going to pull up the fader and then have the frequencies that we want ducked so the vocals can stand out. And if we look here, we have the low pass and high pass filter. I'm going to bring in this low pass filter, and what this does, I can roll off all of these frequencies here, and this is now just going to compress all these frequencies from 2.3 kilohertz and up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring it down to 2 kilohertz, and we're just going to compress this frequency range because these are the main frequencies that are clashing with the vocal. So I'm going to pull this fader up and start applying the sidechain compression.
Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove. I do it because I want.
So the reason we're not getting any gain reduction here is because I have to adjust the threshold, because we're not compressing all of the frequencies in the vocal. We're only compressing 2K and up. So if I take this out, watch what happens to the gain reduction.
Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove. I do it because
So as you can see, using these low pass and high pass filters can be really effective when we're using this side chaining technique. So I'm going to bring it back in, and then I'm going to adjust the threshold.
Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove. I do it because I wanted to. For the sake.
So an important thing here is we're really watching our gain reduction. Of course, we're always using our ears, but the important thing is watching our gain reduction to see how much compression we're applying to the signal.
Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove. I do it because I wanted to. For the.
So I'm going to solo these tracks. It'll make it a little bit here clearer, sorry, to see how this sidechain is actually sounding on this particular vocal.
Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove. I do it because I wanted to. For the sake of dollar signs, and keep doing.
So as you can see, it's actually giving a bit of a pumping effect. So we're actually applying a little bit too much compression. So we want to pull this compressor back so we're not getting quite as much pumping when it's ducking out the synthesizer.
Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove. I do it because I wanted to. For the sake of dollar signs, and keep doing this shit every time. Pack space, gotta be on my grind. Now the truth, so I know the lie.
So now I'm going to A-B it so you can hear the difference.
Yeah, straight to the roof. They loving the way that I do. I told them got nothing to prove. I do it because I wanted to. For the sake of dollar signs, and keep doing this shit every time.
So as you can see, it's just not ducking out that frequency, but it sounds good, but it's just not really sitting on top of the mix. So a side chaining, the key is to have the right balance. If we're not going for a pumping effect, we want to make sure that it's carving out just enough space, but it still sounds natural. But as you can see, it's just a really great technique to help your vocals stand out on top of that lead synth. And it's just all the little things that add up over time. That's why this is just such a great technique. We can EQ, we can carve out EQs on the lead synth, which I've already done here. But just doing the side chaining technique just adds a little bit extra space for our vocal so that it's not clashing with that lead synth. Okay, so now we're going to look at the reverb and delay ducking sidechain technique on vocals. And in this particular tutorial, I'm actually just going to show you how the delay ducking works because the reverb ducking works in the exact same way. So I'm going to play you the bridge here, what we have for the bridge. And this is dry. There's no delay on it yet.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You're there to see me falling, but you know say I be balling. You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You're there to see me falling, but you know say I be balling. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds good, but I think especially in the pockets here where there's a gap, it would sound good to have a delay right here.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You're there to see me falling.
And I think just an overall delay would sound pretty good in that section. So I'm going to unmute the long delay here. I have a half note delay on this vocal so you can hear how it sounds.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. Yeah, straight to the roof.
Okay, so that sounds good, like I said, especially in the gaps there. But what happens is when we have long, loud delays like that, sometimes they can muddy up the mix and just not have the vocal stand out the way we want. And this is where this sidechaining technique really, really comes in handy. So I have my long delay effect send here. And how this works is the same as we've done on the rest of the techniques. We pull up a compressor, and I'm actually just going to use the Avid compressor again. We key in our sidechain, and we're going to route it to bus 29, which is a free bus. And then I'm going to route it. So these bridge tracks are routed into my bridge mix bus here. So I'm actually going to put this on my bridge mix bus. So this is affected on all of the tracks in the bridge. So we're going to go to bus 29, and we're going to rename this, and we're going to call this Bridge Vox Sidechain. So now what I'm going to do is dial in this sidechain, and you can see how it's going to duck the reverbs when the vocals are playing, so the delays aren't so present until we want to release that delay. So I'm going to show you how this works.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. Yeah, straight to the roof.
So what I'm trying to do is duck out the delay until it hits the gaps and it's not overpowering and it's not muddying up the mix. So watch when I A/B it, you can hear that it's ducking out the delay, so it's not in front, too much in front of the vocal.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. You keep counting on.
So it's ducked it out and then it releases it at the end. So I'm going to A/B this so you can hear the difference.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. Yeah, straight.
So that was with the delay, and this is with the sidechain.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. You keep counting on me, but.
So what we want to do for the settings here is we want to have a faster release. So when the compression disengages, it releases quickly so that we can hear the tail of that delay. And then we want somewhat of a medium attack. We don't want the attack too much to completely snuff out the delay. We still want the effect of the delay, but we just don't want it too present until the certain pockets that we want. So I'm going to play this one more time.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. Yeah, straight to the roof.
And this is without the sidechain.
You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. You keep counting on me, but you never calling. You look to see me falling, but you know, see I be ballin'. Yeah, straight.
So as you can see, it's just much cleaner. I really, really love this technique and I use it a lot. And again, this works with reverbs as well in the exact same way. So if you want your vocal to be pushed out of the mix and you still want reverb tails in certain parts of it, but just not drowning the vocal in reverb, then side chaining works really, really well. And again, this is a technique I use all the time. It's one of my favorite tricks. So I just want to quickly go over the difference between an internal and external side chain. When you're new to understanding side chaining, it's just really important to understand the difference between the two. So everything that we've been doing in this tutorial up to this point has been an example of external side chaining. We've been routing it through the key, through a send to another track. So now I'm going to show you what internal side chaining is. So I'm going to use the Pro C here, and I'm going to open the side chain. And in most modern compressors, nowadays, a lot of them will have an internal and external option. So again, what we've been doing in this tutorial have been external. Internal means that it's actually just compressing the signal directly on the track. We're not routing it anywhere. And what this does is allow us to EQ and filter the compressor, kind of like a multi-band compressor in a way. So for example, if we're compressing drums and we just want to filter out the bass and the kick, and we just want to compress the higher frequencies like the hi-hats and the snares, then we have the option to do that. Or if we want to do it the other way and we just want to compress the lower frequencies of the kick or the 808 or the sub, then we can roll off the high frequencies and just focus the compressor on those specific frequencies. And this is what internal side chaining is. So I have this compressor on the drums here. So let's just quickly take a look at this and see how it works in action. So watch my gain reduction. If we're looking at this line here, right now, before I start the filtering, we're getting some compression definitely on the kick. And then when I start rolling it off, you'll see that it's not compressing the kick anymore. So as you can see, that can be very effective. And again, it's just kind of a similar way of using a multi-band compressor without using a multi-band compressor. So it's internally compressing specific frequencies. And that's the difference between an internal and external sidechain. And keep in mind, like the example that I showed you earlier in the tutorial, that these EQs can also be used when we're using an external sidechain. This isn't just utilizing internal sidechaining, but also an external sidechaining.
Hey, so if you're enjoying this content and you're really serious about learning how to mix and you're really looking to take your mixing game to the next level, make sure you check out my brand new recording academy at attentionmusictech.com, because for a limited time I'm offering free access to my first 2 courses. They're part of my new Mixing Clinic series of mini courses that are a real comprehensive dive into mixing lead vocals and mixing beats. So when you sign up to the academy, you'll get access to both the Pro Lead Vocal Mixing Clinic and the Savage Beats Mixing Clinic. And these 2 courses are packed with some of my favorite mixing tips and techniques that I use on all my tracks and work for any genre of music. And I know are guaranteed to help you get more professional sounding mixes, because we're talking over 2 hours of mixing tips that aren't accessible anywhere else but in the academy. So you really don't want to miss out on this opportunity. All you got to do is go to attentionmusictech.com to sign up. And again, this is all free stuff, but only for a limited time. And when you do sign up, you don't only get access to the 2 mini courses, but you get special offers and content only subscribers see. And also you get automatically entered to win one of our free monthly giveaways of industry leading plugins from FabFilter and Plugin Alliance. And if this promo is over by the time you guys see this video, don't worry about it, because I always have great offers going on for all my academy members. So go to attentionmusictech.com and check out all the goodies I got going on for you guys.
So there you have it. That's sidechaining in a nutshell, and 4 common uses of sidechaining that you now understand that you can utilize right away to start taking your music production and your mixes to the next level. So I hope you enjoyed the content as usual, and we'll see you next time.